And now our host, Stephen Lee Morris.
This week, we're joined by Olga Garay English. Born in Santa Clara, Cuba, she became a naturalized US citizen in 1978. She's been an independent arts consultant since 2014, working on California-based national and international projects. From 2007 to 2014, Olga was executive director of the City of Los Angeles Department of Cultural Affairs. During her tenure at the city, the DCA and its programs were awarded more than $23 million in funding from private and public entities. As founding program director for the arts for the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation, Ms. Garay English was responsible for one of the largest national arts funders in the United States. She awarded $145 million to arts organizations in the US and abroad during her nearly 8-year tenure. In 2012, Ms. Garay English was named by the French government as a Knight of the Order of Arts and Letters. Olga Garay English, welcome to Animal Farm.
Hello.
I remember your days at DCA. This is the Department of Cultural Affairs for the City of Los Angeles, which you ran for many years. And your focus at that time really struck a chord with me, because it was, you tried to do something through a municipality that I didn't see being done anywhere else. And it was not just to promote local artists, which is obviously a part of their mandate, but you somehow either explicitly or implicitly suggested that this Los Angeles theater in particular was far too insular, and part of that insularity could be attributed to the lack of exposure to what was going on in the rest of the world. And so you promoted festivals, the idea that we can have locally a healthy ecosystem if we know what's going on, and not every artist can afford to go to on tours to Mexico and Nicaragua and Poland and what have you. That's expensive, and so bring some of the best of those companies to us, which to me was very exciting. It seemed to be part of an era, and I'm wondering, with the advent of nationalist politics here and abroad, that internationalist view of the arts seems to have faded a little bit. And perhaps I'm wrong. Correct me where you think the trends are going, especially now in light as we hopefully are coming through the pandemic.
Yeah, no, I think that you're right on the money. And I think that money is a key word to use in that sentence. When I was the head of cultural affairs for Miami-Dade College, back in the early 90s, there was a plethora of foundations around the country that were not, some explicitly giving funding for international work. I know the Ford Foundation gave Miami-Dade, under my leadership, a major multi-year grant that was specifically for internationalizing the performing arts. That was the name of the program. And there were, the Rockefeller Foundation funded international work, as did others. And all of those have, if not completely dried up, definitely atrophied. And so what happens now is that people in the arts who want to do international work are having to dip into their general operating funds because there's no funding specifically to promote international exchange and engagement, which I think is a real pity. And I think that whether that followed the isolationist policies of the last administration, or it was more random. I don't know the genesis of it, but it definitely has shrunk significantly over the last 20 years.
Has the activity in Central and South America, as well as Europe, has that also shrunk for the same reasons, or is it just our exposure to them?
I think that first of all, I think that in other countries, the festival strategy is much more prevalent than it is in the United States. And I think that that is partially due to the fact that back in the 60s, when the Ford Foundation really kind of launched the whole regional theater movement that we know today, there was a real emphasis on place-based kind of civic artistic infrastructure, so that any city or even mid-sized city that pretended to be a cultural player, not even a cultural capital, but a cultural player, had to have the regional theater, a museum, maybe a performing arts center, sort of the keystone institutions that were considered, the cultural infrastructure of any community. And that meant that theater making in the United States, unlike many other countries, really emphasized kind of, the set and the scenery and production values and things that were and very playwright driven,
Yes.
things that tethered that theater to its community.
Yes.
Not that there's anything wrong with that, but unlike many other countries where that kind of infrastructure was not perhaps possible because of funding concerns or for whatever reason, theater tends to be built to be a touring art form, so that you can pick up and go from, your base in Santiago de Chile and, go over to Argentina or to Italy or whatever and put on your show with much less emphasis on what that whole cinematography, that staging, it's much more corporal, it's much more ambulatory. So I think that one of the reasons that we don't tend to have theater festivals in the United States, and I'm being very general here, is that our theater has gone a very different route. It's really, it's not unusual for, a theater like here, Center Theater Group, putting on a major production that the set costs, $250,000, and it runs for 3 weeks, and then that's the end of it.
Yeah. It's just a completely different model. It's almost medieval, isn't it? The way the early Christian church subsidized the theater to go on tour and send the messages of the Bible from village to village on pageant wagons. That's that's the model you're really talking about. It's very interesting. Among the many fellowships that you have created is one they're all in honor of your late husband, Dr. Kerry English. And just to keep on the internationalist thread, you have announced a TCG-based fellowship, Global Connectivity Fund. And how does that work? And then we'll get back to the other fellowships you have, and then.
So, Kerry was a physician. He worked in Watts here in Los Angeles for 40 years or so, with abused kids and with foster kids. And so I really tried to, but he was a huge theater lover. He loved all the arts, but his particular favorite was the theater. And so when he passed away last year, I wanted to set up a couple of fellowships or arts awards that were in honor to him. And the one at Theater Communications Group has an international focus because, we traveled the world seeing theater. We traveled all over. 1 week we'd be in Dublin, and the next week we'd be, in in Chile. 1 week we'd be in New York City for Under the Radar, which I helped to found, or Hong Kong, whatever. So the TCG, Dr. Kerry English Global Connectivity Fund, for the first 2 years is going to provide support for a position that will increase the bandwidth of TCG to do more international connections.
Okay.
They are the US base of the International Theater Institute.
Yes.
And so it provides them with staffing support that will allow them to really ratchet up what they're able to do in terms of an international programs. So let's see, the woman who was hired, her name is Julie Hendren, and Julie is based in New Mexico, and she ran an international theater festival there. I believe it was called Rattlestick. And so she has been committed to international cultural exchange for many years. And
Yes.
we wanted to have somebody that could hit the ground running. Trick Lock Company was her company, and then it was the Revolutions International Theater Festival. That's what it was called. And she's traveled the world, has a wonderful network of theater professionals, and so we wanted to build in that capacity for at least 2 years, possibly 3. The last 7 years of the 10-year pledge will be used to fund U.S. artists, theater makers who want to do projects abroad, and theater makers from abroad who want to do projects in the United States. And so that was one side of our lives that I really wanted to highlight. Another one of the fellowships that I've set up is at Ojai Playwrights Conference.
It's very different. This is very different.
Very different.
Yes.
Kerry used to be on their board, and now I'm on the board. And that is to choose one artist annually, one playwright annually, who will receive $7,500 as a fellowship. And he or she will have exhibited some of the characteristics that Kerry found so critical in his own work, which were commitment to racial justice, commitment to community, commitment to using the craft of playwriting to deal with contemporary social issues, that kind of thing.
And your first fellowship has gone to, it was announced recently, to Julia Izumi.
Yes, Julia Izumi, who's I would say she's early mid-career. And what Ojai did was they choose 8 playwrights every year to provide a residency experience to. And so they chose 3 of those 8 artists to who they felt met the characteristics we had outlined in the fellowship package, and sent me those 3 the scripts, and I read all 3, and the one that resonated with me the most was Julia's. And it was not only because I just thought she had a very, very lyrical, very beautiful, and sort of almost magic realism kind of feel to the work, but it dealt with kids who have been adopted, and again, that was part of Kerry's professional, and so it was just kismet, right? And so I was just very, very pleased, and she wrote a beautiful essay saying why she felt she should be the recipient of this award.
And finally, there was the MLK Creative Fellowship, which is connected to the Heidi Duckler Dance Company. Just if you could say a few words about that.
Sure.
This is one of many fellowships you've created
Correct.
to honor.
I'm correct. It's kind of a combination of fellowships, and then I've also created a fund at Red Cat, the Edna Disney Keller Theater. Oh, I deserve a star for that one.
They should fund you for getting the name right.
And that is, I started a trust that when I die, 3 organizations are going to be the recipients of this trust. And one of them is Red Cat to start an international commissioning program. One of them is the Hollywood Arts Collective, which is something that I started when I was at the Department of Cultural Affairs, which just broke ground about 2 or 3 weeks ago in the heart of downtown Hollywood, and we'll have 151 affordable housing units for artists, as well as it'll be the headquarters for the Actors Fund Western Region. And there's the Gloria Kaufman Theater. There's a whole sort of art center, as well as the 151 units. So there'll be a 3rd recipient, Red Cat Ojai, to continue the fellowship. So I've been a busy little bee.
There are, yes, you have. There are 2 individuals who are known and beloved by at least our local theater community, as well as nationally. One of them, of course, is Kerry, and the other is Diane Rodriguez. And I was wondering if you could just, as we close out, just have a few words about both. But let's start with Diane and how you knew her.
So Diane and I met back in the day, must have been in the, I would say, late 80s. I was still living in Miami, and we met on a peer review panel that the Rockefeller Foundation was having. And we were the only 2 Latinas, or Latinx, as they say now, on the panel. And we bonded immediately. And we just kept in touch, but she was here in Los Angeles, I was in Miami, so our paths didn't cross that often. And that was before, you know, the internet and emails and all that kind of stuff. When I was asked to be the founding director for the arts for the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation, I moved from Miami to New York. And of course, Diane went to New York much more often than she went to Miami, or that I went to LA. When I was living in Miami. And so we rekindled our friendship, and she's really the one that got me out to LA, because she contacted me and said, Mayor Villaraigosa is looking for an executive director for the city of Los Angeles, Department of Cultural Affairs, and you would be perfect for it. Do you mind if I, you know, put your name up? And so I said, yeah, sure, of course. I had never lived outside of the Eastern Seaboard. So I just said, why not? And it was really just a life changer, because not only did I get to head the department and really steward it through the Great Recession, but I got to meet Kerry, and Diane was our matron of honor. So it was a lovely
Now,
things. Yeah.
Kerry was omnipresent. I think he was, there are many reasons he was beloved, but this is a guy who showed up, and you said it wasn't his day job. He really had no reason other than his pure passion and his love of the arts to be so present at so many local stage productions. As you said, he was at all kinds of events, but primarily, as you say, his love was at the theater. And it was just, I think, anyone who attends theater regularly in Los Angeles can say within a year, it's like every 1 month to 2 months, there would be Kerry in an audience member, which is a particularly unusual and interesting combination of interests. So I was wondering if you could close out with any stories or anecdotes that speak to his love of the arts as well as his love for helping children.
Well, you know, he's a pediatrician, and he went to UCLA medical school, and then he got a fellowship at Yale. He also got a fellowship at King's College in London. So he, you know, that was his profession. But he always told a story about going to a production at Center Theater Group where Richard Chamberlain played Cyrano de Bergerac, and that there were 3 curtains calls after the performance, and that the audience was just in ecstasy. And that gave him, you know, sort of a window into the power of the arts. And ever since then, he said he had been more of a movie geek. And all of a sudden, it was just all of his energy started being channeled through theater. And he always used to say, when we'd be out somewhere in the community, he'd say, you know, Olga's not letting me see theater so much anymore. Look at him like, what? And he said, she's making me see dance and music and go to gallery openings as well. So,
oh, you horrible person.
So I think we really made a good match. You know, it was eye-opening for him because, you know, I started taking him on all my trips, and, you know, so we were, like I said, under the radar in New York every single year. From there, we would ship our winter clothes back to Los Angeles and go on to Festival Internacional Santiago Mil, where it was like 90 degrees versus like 15 degrees in New York. So we had, you know, the privilege of traveling all over the world to see theater. I think that it was a life change for him too. So when I met him, he had something like 3 years worth of vacation time that he hadn't taken. And by third year we were together, he was having to buy vacation time because we were going so many places. So yeah.
Lucky for both of you.
Yeah. He was an exceptional human being.
Next week, we're joined by novelist and playwright and actor Gay Wally. Her novel, The Erotic Fire of the Unattainable, was published by IML Productions and was made into an independent film directed by Frank Vitali and released in 2020. Her play, Love, Genius, and a Walk, about Gustav Mahler, opened in the Midtown Festival in New York in 2013 and was nominated for 6 awards, including Best Playwright. It was also performed at the Etc. Theatre in London in 2013. Ms. Wally has written a collection of books under the title Venus as She Ages. One of those books, Right, She Said, studies the life of French novelist and film director Marguerite Duras.